This episode of Fermented Adventure the Podcast features Aidan Mehigan of Natterjack Irish Whiskey. This whiskey was built on the premise of being fun and different. Be sure to reach out to Aidan and Natterjack Irish Whiskey and let them know what you thought about the podcast. Cheers! Hello, ladies and gentlemen, craft spirit enthusiasts, and those interested in the intoxicating world of craft distilleries, cideries, meaderies, wineries, and the occasional foray into breweries. It's Rich Shane, and welcome to Fermented Adventure, the podcast, where we bring you the fascinating people that are making the mash, fermenting, distilling, bottling, pouring, and delivering to you some of the finest libations in the world. Before we get started, here are a few housekeeping items. Thank you for bringing the podcast into wherever you are and whatever you're doing. We truly are grateful that you have chosen to listen and make us part of your day. It would mean the world to us if you left a 5-star review. This helps us climb in the rankings, and it makes it easier for others to find us. Don't hesitate to leave us your comments as well. If the podcast didn't meet your expectations, tell us why. We're always striving to improve. You can find us at fermentedadventure.com. We are on Instagram and Facebook as Fermented Adventure. Email us at fermentedadventure@gmail.com. All right, FA Nation, let's meet our guest. He's Aidan Mehigan. I'm Rich Shane. This is Fermented Adventure, the podcast. Aidan, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Rich. Really great to be here.
It's great to have you, and we haven't seen each other since Bar Convent, Brooklyn. And when Dawn and I went around and we were trying all these emerging brands, we came across Natterjack Irish Whiskey. And it almost stopped the show for us because we both sat there, we both were standing there, and where is this, this wonderful Irish whiskey, where does this come from? So how did Natterjack Irish Whiskey get started?
So I was living in London, and I was I liked a night out as much as the next person, and I realized that I didn't have a favorite Irish whiskey, and so I was working in finance, and I just kind of thought maybe Irish whiskey's missed somebody else. I was staring at a screen and wanted to build something. I wanted to really do something different in life and go and build something that you could actually hold. So Natterjack was kind of born at that stage. This is kind of in 2015, 16, and really, at the time, Irish whiskies were kind of linked to surnames, Jameson, and place names, Bushmills, right? And really, they were the two categories of Irish whiskey. No one was really doing anything in another space. And so we registered Natterjack. Our friends at Jack Daniels sued us and said they owned Jack in relation to whiskey. And we came to an arrangement with them. We can get into that later. But and Natterjack was kind of born out of that, right? And the idea of trying to do something differently. We didn't have provenance in Irish whiskey. I don't have a grandfather who used to make, or I don't have a distillery in our blood. I want to be honest about that, right? We were doing this from a standing start. And we wanted to make sure that everything that we did stayed in line with that idea of being different. And that meant flavor profile. It meant putting a critter on the label. Is it a frog? Is it a toad? Maybe no one cares. I mean, we care. It's our wonderful toad. But when you think about putting that toad in the bottle, for us, that was quite different. And it certainly was different at the time, because for me, it's very easy to put on the front of a bottle a really regal looking animal, right? Like, we think about some of the behemoths of American distilling, like Buffalo Trace. Like, there's a buffalo, right? There's definitely a sense of quality. And whereas a toad, is there a sense of quality? You have to earn it. It's a harder thing to do. And so that was the different aspect of it. And then we tried to do everything differently, right? So we built a very different team. We got a distiller with a different slant on Irish whiskey. And we got branding and a story that was different but relatable. And that's kind of where it started. We launched in February 2019. And by the end of February 2019, we were in 4 global markets and 6 US states. And then at that point, I realized that the power of this story was telling it in our target market, which was the US. And that was kind of the path to why we're now here. Myself and my family live in Austin, Texas, and we're in, 15 US states now, 16 US states now. 13 global markets. So it's been up and down. we've made some clangers, but we've done some things really, really well, and we've stayed the course, because it's, as I said to someone at the start, whiskey's not a get rich quick scheme; it's a go broke slowly scheme, and so we've stayed the course, and it's been an amazing journey.
Well, you said something about doing differently, and I think from the energy and the personalities of the people we've met, you and the team with Natterjack, you're looking to be not just an Irish whiskey on the shelf. You're looking to be a disruptor, and you're looking to, as you said, there's a toad on the outside of the bottle. And, some people may say, I think that toad's kind of handsome myself. I think that toad carries the same position, the same, energy that we talk about that a buffalo could. This toad has got an attitude. So the idea of being different and a disruptor, what's the mindset there for Natterjack?
The mindset really is, and I don't think I'm allowed to say this, but the mindset for me is we're going after somebody different to who our peers are going after, right? When we think about who our target market is, right? A lot of our peers go after the aficionados, right? The people who really know their stuff, and they've been drinking whiskey for years, and they love a scotch, and it's the burn, and it's the do, and it's all that sort of stuff. And for me, those people are leaving the category in a box, right? It's a smaller and smaller pool of people who get older and older and get more into it, right? I'm not actually going after that. And I'm going after the people who are coming to brown spirits. So we made this really smooth Irish whiskey. It's really easy drinking. Like it's a great introduction. It's a great gateway drug from gin to Irish whiskey. And that's what we want to do. It's got to be smooth, but it's got to be able to be used in cocktails. And it's not up its own ass, right? To not put too fine a point on it. Like, I'm not telling you it's like a Macallan 15 or it's like a Redbreast 12. We're not. And the brand says that because I want everybody to drink it. I don't want it to be exclusive on price. I don't want it to preclude people joining us because the flavor is too much. I actually want it to be what an old friend of mine used to call, which is great drinking whiskey. And that's it. And it is like a half a bottle of it will disappear and you'll be like, I don't know where that went. Because it's really, really smooth. Now we can play around, Rich, with lots of flavor profiles after the fact. But what we're not going to do is follow our peers down a path of 10 SKUs, right? Sorry, that's such nonsense talk. To follow down 10 products where we've got
10 expressions, right?
Exactly. We're not going to do that because I'll do that when 500,000 people know who Natterjack is, or when 1 million, when 2 million, whatever the figure is, right? When people know it, then that's when you do it. But realistically, we wanted to support and be a brand that people know and can get behind, and not constantly be trying to innovate to and what the right way to put this is, we got to support some of the best brands in the world in the alcohol spirit space are single expression brands, right? And we want it to be so good that we need to be on people's back bar, and we need to be on people's cocktails, we need to be on people's home bars, but not constantly inundating people with a new orange expression or a coffee expression and that's not to say that's wrong for somebody else. It's really not. And some people have made huge success of it, but it's not for us. And that's that point of being different. And also the toad differentiates us, and our honesty differentiates us, because we've been through tough times, we've been through good times. We've always been honest about what our background is, right? We don't have a distillery. We do our finishing ourselves, we do our blending ourselves, but it's distilled for us. And that's been really key because the consumer, the further we go down the path of mass production, the more consumers are lied to. We really didn't want to do that because we wanted to communicate our story. And we think that's compelling and a little bit different.
You talk about making sure you have this at the home bar. Well, our bottle has been sitting there waiting for our interview. And Scott of Scott's Mini Woodshop, we had a little get together this week, and Scott, when you come to my house, everything's fair game. I don't care what it is, whether it's the, lower end whiskey, the craft whiskey, the higher end whiskey, those, bottles you only find in one spot. And Dawn said to Scott, hey, don't drink the whole bottle because we need it for the podcast interview on Monday.
Yeah.
But he killed a third of the bottle, and he kept raving about it. Every time he kept coming back. This is amazing. Where'd you get this? And is it in the state? And we're in Pennsylvania. So chances are it's not, but we can venture into New Jersey and Delaware to pick that up. You spoke to the fact that, you're a financial guy, and you stop and you say, how do I do this? I'm not just going to go buy my favorite. I'm going to make my favorite. How do you and your team start putting that together where you approach a distiller and you start to do this blending and going through, and how many samples? What's all that like for you and Natterjack?
It's a great question, and it throws me back to ages ago. And I'm like, early on in the process of starting the business, I worked out that I didn't know anything about making whiskey, right? And that's the God's honest truth. Like, with the best will in the world, I wish I did, but I don't. So I realized I need to go and get that expertise. But I did know, like, when you start a business, and especially if it's a brand, a lot of it feeds off your taste, right? You back yourself to know what you think looks good, and you know what you think tastes good, right? And as the founder and as the leader, you've got to back that. Now, in the real world, maybe what you think looks good actually looks shite, and maybe what you think tastes good tastes dreadful, and you're not set up for doing that. But the fact that I know what I like the look of, I know what I like the smell of and the taste of, doesn't mean I can personally create that. And that's a kind of something you got to let go of, right? I'm not I'm not an artist. I couldn't have drawn the toad. Kelvin drew the toad. I couldn't have designed the label. Slater designed did an incredible job on the label and gave us some options. And I was like, that's what I like. That's what I like. And so you've got to back that what you like, other people are going to like. And the real world might sit you on your ass and say, actually, what you like, no one likes. And you're a Walter Mitty, and it doesn't work. And so, but you take that chance because you'll never know. If you sit there and go, what if people don't like it? You'll never print your book. You'll never release your whiskey, and you've got to actually put it out there and take the criticism. And interestingly, about 6 months after we launched, it's still on Instagram somewhere, but I did a piece to camera reading out our bad reviews. And one review comes to mind, and he said, it said one of two things. He either said, nice whiskey, shit content, or he said, nice content, shit whiskey. I can't remember which it was, but you take that, right? Because you're like, okay, well, we're getting this wrong or we're getting it right. And you try and learn. You try and learn. Some of it you learn. Some of it you just say, look, this could be funny, might be funny, but you crack on. But the actual process is, right, so didn't have a distiller, went and met someone, did a course to learn how to make whiskey. Turned out it got on really well with the guy, Jordan. He's still our executive distiller. And then we're like, okay, we want to release, this is 2016. We're like, we've got these whiskeys. What do you think about the flavor profile? And it involved me getting on a load of flights. Like I met him in San Francisco. I met him in New York, always with older, different whiskeys that I was in a position to source. And at the end, on my trip in 2017, we decided on our blend. And he's like, this is the blend. If we put this blend into Virgin American Oak for 1 year, we're going to have an incredible whiskey. So that was the gamble we took. We did that then and there, and that was ready to go in February of 2019, and that's when we launched. It was get ready to go at the end of 2018. Then I met with Stephen, who's now on our board, the chairman of our board, who was an ex VP at Pernod Ricard, right? So he was on the team that brought Jameson its great success, right? And really, he had the strategy ideas of how do we execute a go-to-market here, right? And we're like, yeah. So we got that. We got finance from a source that doesn't bear talking about, and we cracked on. And that's how we realistically got it to market in 2019. You bring in those things, right? I brought vision, because the one thing you can't buy, Rich, is vision. You can buy execution of most other aspects of a business, but the vision, you can't. It's really hard to go and say, and don't get me wrong. Big businesses do it all the time where they bring in someone to bring their vision to a brand. But you can't, if you don't have vision, it's very hard to buy it in at an early stage because it'd be very expensive. And so I brought the vision in inverted commas, a dream, and I don't think I'm allowed to say relentless energy, but I'm sure some people found it relentless. And that's kind of what got it to market and why we continued through a pandemic that very nearly cost us the business. So that's the round the houses way of saying what we did.
Well, you mentioned virgin American oak, new American oak barrels, and you allowed that to rest for a year. Are we talking 53-gallon barrels, or did you choose to go with a shorter time span? Because we're drinking the cast strength that you graciously sent to us. But I'll tell you, the color has such a deep color to it for the idea that this only has been resting for 1 year. So
now, no. So that's a great point, right? It's finished for a year, but it was 3.5 years in bourbon, in ex-bourbon before that.
All right. Just want to make sure we're keeping all the information together.
Exactly. So it's 4.5 to 5 years, depending on when it got disgorged. It's not older than 5 years. So it's about a 4.5-year-old liquid you're drinking. But the extract, the color comes from char number 4 is what we went for on our barrels, which is quite a heavy char. And that was, once again, Jordan was like, this is what's it makes an alligator skin of the char inside the barrels and gets much more extract. So, and that was, we couldn't believe it either when it came out of barrel, the color of it and what it tasted like. We were amazed.
I think for the consumer, you don't have this expectation of this color coming from an Irish whiskey, or for that matter, even a Scotch. And I think, again, that's we're breaking the rules, right?
Yeah.
We're really going to do something, and then we'll secondary finish it. We'll rest it in this new oak to really impart those fresh vanillins in there, the maple characteristic, the sweetness of it, and almost give it a chance, I guess, to filter out a little bit with a number 4 char that is going to take out maybe some off tones or maybe some impurities that come out of the grain. Was that again some of the thought process?
Exactly, and I think if there's two ways, right? One, our whiskey was going to be kind of 4 to 4.5 years old, right? That's still quite young, and sometimes can be quite sharp, and so what we really wanted to do was soften some of those, and I'm speaking a bit out of turn here, Jordan would be better, but some of those higher alcohol, higher volatility alcohols, was to soften those with the virgin American oak, right? And to allow the smoothness of triple distillation to come through. And because that's the key difference between Irish and Scotch is the triple distillation, right? And that, well, peated is different, but I don't like peated whiskey, but
send all your letters to Aidan now. He's in Austin.
Yeah, no interest.
Those peated whiskey fans.
Yeah. I can't get there. And don't get me wrong, like I like bourbon and I like Irish, but so the other way to think about this is philosophically, right? What we've been doing in Irish whiskey has been we take ex-bourbon barrels, we put our whiskey in, and then we put them in sherry or port or whatever afterwards, right? And for me, there's a glorious purity to using virgin oak in whiskey. It imparts those super flavors that I love on bourbon. And I was like, right, well, so normally bourbon gets the first cut, which I should talk about this. Bourbon gets the first extract from the barrel, and we get the second extract, right? And I was like, but I want some of the first extract. I want some of the virgin olive oil, which is the first press, right? I want some of the first extract. And so how do we put that into Irish whiskey? Well, probably doesn't work to age Irish whiskey in virgin American oak from day one, because the flavors there's not real point in having triple distilled whiskey that's super smooth to have it crushed by the virgin oak, right? Like the flavors wouldn't come through that make it Irish. So then we're like, right, well, let's tack it on at the end for a year and see where we get to. And that's kind of turning the process on its head. Once again, trying to do it do it differently and lean into it and not be afraid of the fact that maybe it tastes a bit bourbonish, or maybe we are a stepping stone to bourbon, because lots of people, lots of producers are really scared that they're creating a Scotch flavored Irish, and you get lost then. Well, who cares, right? If I can drink Scotch, and who cares about an Irish bourbon? But actually, the process that we've done and the triple distillation, because I'm pretty sure there's not that many bourbons, and you'd know this better than I do, there are not many triple distilled bourbons in the States. It's an extra process. You don't have to do it. And I don't know that it adds anything to the whiskey, but this was a way to differentiate ourselves, because now it's super smooth. But as you say, with those vanillas, those citrus extracts, my father says a bit of spice box, but I don't know what a spice box is. So once again, that's outside my area of expertise.
I want to geek out with you a little bit and talk about where you're sourcing your grains from for this whiskey. And because I think that's probably, again, what that cutting against the grain attitude as far as what you're putting in the bottle.
Yeah. So it's our whiskey is sourced from Great Northern Distillery, and the grain side of the whiskey comes from France, as I understand it. And then the malt side of the whiskey is all Irish. So that's the provenance of them. We're not involved at a high level on that. We know what types the grain, what type the maize is, but we don't currently produce enough to dictate what they buy in. So that's, as I say, we can be honest, and that's the honest truth.
Pardon the interruption. Thank you so much for listening to Fermented Adventure, the podcast. Could you do us a favor? Hit that follow button. It makes it easier for others to find us, and it helps us climb in the rankings. Take a screenshot of the podcast, post it, tag us, and let everyone know that you listen to the Fermented Adventure podcast. Now, back to our podcast. This whole process, I'm quite sure you've had your challenges. You've had some pitfalls. You've got some troll out there, talking about your content or your whiskey, and, you grow from that, and you expand, because if you don't, we don't have this conversation. Have there been some pitfalls or some mistakes or little obstacles other than, hey, we're going to start this renegade whiskey distillery during the pandemic? Any other those things that have happened or you've experienced? Yeah,
there is. There's a really funny story, right? So, you've got a bottle there in your hands, and we had this great idea for it was going to be wax dipped, right? Excuse me. Our friends down at Maker's Market are the only people who can use red wax dipping, and they've trademarked that, and that's a story as old as time in whiskey, and that's great. But I love the idea of wax dipping, right? So we got an order from our Chinese importer in early 2019. Okay. So, and it was like, I don't know how many cases it was. It was probably 1,000 cases, right? So a full 20-foot container, maybe a full 40-foot. No, it was a full 20-foot container. So this was amazing news. This was the biggest order. It would put our projections for year one of a tiny business way ahead of where we were going to be, right? Just couldn't believe it. This was amazing. So we bottled it, we get the special labels, everything. And let me tell you, shipping to China is complex. And basically it was, I think there was two of us in the office trying to get it over the line, trying to work. And we didn't have anyone who knew anything about logistics, right? So ships to China. And there's a couple of things, right? 700 milliliters in a bottle, and there's space between the cork and the bottle, right? And that space is very, it's worked out by people far brighter than I am, right? Because it allows liquids to expand and contract and not push the cork out, right? And in normal conditions, great. So we bottled it, and when the guys were bottling it, they filled the bottle. They didn't think at the bottling line that it looked like it was full, so they thought it looked worse. So they filled it up just a little bit more, maybe 10, 15 mils more, so that the bottle would look more full. The knock-on effect of that was there wasn't enough air for the whiskey to expand and contract. So we didn't know this, and we just had wax covering the bottles. So container goes to China, goes through the Panama Canal where it's 50 degrees in the middle of the year and in the middle of the summer, and it gets down to 45 degrees, whatever the so I suppose it got like 110 for
because you're talking centigrade on the
exactly, right? Like 110, okay. Right? So the whiskey expands, pushes out the corks because the wax has gone soft. And so when it gets to China, they open it up and they said it smelt absolutely amazing, but 75% of the whiskey was ruined because the corks all popped out, right? So like, more sophisticated operators would most certainly never have hand wax dipped and not put a closure on it or something like that. So long and short of it all, this was a big loss to us, right? It was a decent order and it was going to cost, it was about 30 grand. So our Chinese distributor came in and was like, look, what are you going to do? And I was like, there's not much I can do. Like, do you guys have insurance? And they're like, we do, but the insurance doesn't cover this. And I was like, sound like great insurance, but okay, here's what we'll do. If you will order 3,000 cases from me, and I get that order by the end of the year, I'll cover the loss. And they said, yeah. And they're still our distributor in China. And it was a great turning of an error into a positive. So we learned quite a bit on that. We've never wax dipped whiskey again, and we put PET closures because as you're shipping off 4 containers a month, it doesn't make sense to take a chance with what looks pretty but doesn't really work.
It's all learning experience, and it's trial and error. Yeah, the idea was, how cool would this be? I have to tell you, I think the way the bottle is created, the bottle you choose, I think that happening made your presentation even better. It really made the bottle look cleaner and sleeker, because then you get that wax in different proportions. And I think the front and center grabbing of what people get to see on that shelf that distinguishes you from all the other whiskeys that they may come across is that 3-dimensional toad. So how did it come to be that not too many bottles have a 3-dimensional emblem? I almost want to figure out how to pry this off when we ever finish this bottle. And and save it like a belt buckle or something.
That's exactly. And I'm speaking to a belt buckle maker here in Texas to get some prizes. We're gonna work with him to make kind of some exclusive toad belt buckles to really kind of lean into our Texan experience here. But how the toad on the bottle came into being, I think what I tasked the guys with was finding what we really wanted to do was have a toad on the back label, right? Where as you drunk, it got revealed over time. And so its eyes would pop in after you'd had the third shot out of the bottle. And it just didn't work, because when if it was sitting on the shelf, you wouldn't be able to see the toad, and then who's going to buy your whiskey? And then we were playing around with this and really, we got approached by an Argentinian company who said, we'd be able to make you a toad. And it was, okay, maybe we will, maybe make us a toad. So they made us some samples. Like the process it wasn't a light bulb moment of here, we need to do this. It's like, what's available to us? What can people make? And how can we then turn that into really excellent design? And we work with this company, Ian and Sinead and Steph in Slater Design. And they do an incredible job of taking some crazy ideas and maybe some text messages from me and from the team and turn them into actual designs that work. And that was one of those times. It turned out much better than we thought, though. We didn't when I kind of thought they were on a hiding to nothing. They came to the office. They were like, we don't have any Irish business at the moment. You want us to take a punt and see what we can do? And they just came back and it was amazing. But when you talk about the stakes, the first 1,000 of those toads that arrived, they had some sticky stuff on the back of them for putting on the bottles, but the shape was wrong. So Scott, our head of global sales, spent a weekend in there with Gorilla Glue and elastic bands. There's a picture once again online where he's like Gorilla Gluing the back of the toad, putting it onto the bottle and putting elastic band around. And that's what small business is, right? Now, you'll see I got Scott to do it, but I must have been busy that weekend.
There are plenty of times when people sit around at a bar, their backyard, dinner table, what have you. They're drinking. I mean, we've talked to the guys at Kiru, that they came up with making their own whiskey in a sauna. And there are a lot of times when people are sitting around just saying, I can make this. Mm-hmm. Through the process of putting this together, what were some of those light bulb moments or that feedback that you got that you were on the right path, that what you were doing was going to be accepted by those whiskey drinkers to say, this is different. This is cool. This is something unlike I've had before. This is unique. Or what were those moments where you said, wait, hold on, let me enjoy this moment for a second?
So yeah, the first one that springs to mind was a mate of mine who was, I used to live with them. We were both living in London at the time. Connor Doyle was, I went out for a pint with him when I was I kind of come up with this idea that I was going to leave my finance job and set up a whiskey company. And we went out for a few beers. And the next morning I got to my desk, and at my desk was an email that said, I guess here's a place to start. And it was like the Wikipedia of how do you make whiskey. And I was like, okay. And that's when I started the business plan that day. I shouldn't tell my old boss because I was probably doing it on his time. But that was the kind of first moment where I went and built out. It was a dreadful business plan. There's a copy of it around here somewhere. It's like 4 pages. Then the next moment was when we registered Natterjack, and I was raising money at the time. And I thought, I got a letter in one of those FedEx envelopes, and it came in and it was said, it was from Jack Daniels. And I was like, they want to invest. This is amazing. Like, one of the majors has noticed who we are. And then I opened it up and it was a cease and desist saying they owned Jack in relation to whiskey and we couldn't do it. Now we came to an arrangement, and I guess we're all friends. I mean, I don't drink Jack Daniels anymore, but there you go.
You've said this twice, and I'm thinking, does this mean Jack in the Box is coming for you? Does this mean Jack Links is coming for you? Does this mean ex-pro football player Jack Lambert is coming for you because they use the name Jack? I mean,
no,
there's nothing about this bottle that would say to me, I confuse this with Jack Daniels.
No, but there's a trademark law is very specific. So we didn't trade Natterjack in relation to a hamburger that would cost Jack in the Box. So we registered it under Section 33 something or other, and we registered it in relation to distilled spirits. So that's the key point here. So they obviously sit there and go, what are the new trademarks in relation to distilled spirits today? And old Rochelle Andrews, or whatever her name was, at their office obviously saw Natterjack come up, and that's when they sent us the cease and desist. So it's only in relation to that. You can't come after us if you make a beer that's called Jack, or even if you make a beer that's called Natterjack. You can't really come after us because you only protect it in the sphere you're in. So that was the kind of second moment. Then the third moment was the launch in February of 2019, where we had an event in Dublin. We launched. There was a great press and fanfare, and people loved the Toad. Like, it was the Toad has worked, and we don't know why. I don't have an answer to that, but people like the image of the Toad. They like the idea of the Toad, and people love Toads. Who knew? And at that event, for the first, I don't know if you ever run a launch event, but for the first 10 minutes, I was like, there's nobody here. This is a fucking disaster. What are we going to do? Right. And then I turn around about 45 minutes later, and I was like, they're 5 deep at the bar. We have completely understaffed this event. It's amazing. That was kind of an amazing moment as well, whereas actually, because not many people know this, but I spent a period of time rocking around events with a half a bottle of Jameson and a half a bottle of Breckenridge rye in a bottle, poured in my flat. And I would say, this is indicative of the flavor profile I'm going for. This is what I want. It's Jordan's whiskey and an Irish whiskey. And it was completely made up. Even my dad was like, what are you doing? Like, you can't do this. You can't say that's yours. I was like, no, I'm not saying it's mine. I'm saying it's an example of what I want to distill once I raise capital. And so on that event, that launch night, this was actually our whiskey. We're no longer faking it till we made it. Now, we still had to, if I'm being honest, like, we hadn't made it. We'd only launched a whiskey. We still had a lot of work to do, still have a lot of work to do. But that was another moment. People loved the spirit in the bottle, and you saw them talking about it. And I didn't know who these people were. And that was an amazing moment. And we won a design award, and that was amazing in relation to whiskey. And then we won, I think Jim Murray gave us 92 points, which was like a industry agreement that the whiskey was really good. And then there was we won double gold a few weeks ago. The point here, Rich, is it's also about the people who come along with you, right, on the journey, and the people who are willing to commit time and effort to try and help and to really get behind the brand and behind me personally to support me. And look, as I say, there's been hard times during COVID. The business and our ability to control it was in the toilet, because we couldn't travel. I couldn't meet you until BCB 2023, right? Like, and there's these 2 years where I had to try and keep a business afloat when we weren't able to sell. China was in free fall, so there's our biggest client gone. Our second biggest client was the Irish airport. No one's traveling, gone. We've got bills to pay. We've got contracts to meet, and it got really hard. But there were some people who stayed along for the ride, and that's also a pinch me kind of moment that we're now, as I say, on the up. But there's just this amazing feeling of optimism and youth in a company that's been launched for a while, but minus those 2 years, which is why we were on that emerging stand that we met on that day.
I would imagine, had you not gone through some of these trials, had you not seen some of these experiences come your way, we might be having somewhat of a different conversation. We could be talking about totally different things, but what this has done is it's created character to the brand, the story, your team, and you almost come out of this saying, hey, we can do anything at this point. I mean, let's just not screw this up, but we can really continue on this path, build those loyal followers, build the brand, and again, really set this category on its ear in a way. What I enjoy that, we met at BarCon in Brooklyn, and, for me, going through and you taste, truthfully, we fell in love with this, but it's at a point where our palates are very, affected by all we've had prior to getting there. So this is more like that intimate moment where I have the bottle, I have my Glencairn, and I can really experience this on its own, almost really for the first time. I don't open it. I don't try it. I want to do it with you. But what I really enjoyed through just the nose is this is a wonderful progression. If you're talking Irish, right, you can tell a story. You can carry a story a long way, and it's captivating. It's interesting. And then there's the accent. So you almost sit down and you say, all right, you can talk for an hour. I'll just listen because I know I'm going to be so captivated, entertained. That's what this whiskey is on the nose. It started out it's a cask strength. We're talking 122.6, right? I mean, almost, 123 on the proof. So the ethanol really is there. It presents. But as we've been speaking, this has been open for about 20 minutes. It's really gone through. The first thing that I really received after we hit that opening was it smelled like a freshly cut. It smelled like a wood shop. Like if you're going into a wood shop, like I was taken back to high school in wood shop where you hear the band saws and the drills and there's shavings everywhere, but it wasn't oaky, but it was nice and woody and a nice character. It's gone to places right now where I got citrus. I got, to your dad's point about the spice box, I almost got like these vanilla spice, these spice wafers. Because I got some hint of yeastiness in there. It was almost like a cookie. I got the oak, and where I'm at now is this chocolate-covered, whiskey-soaked sherry is what's on the nose of this glass. Yeah. So this is a great story. We could just sit here and nose, but I wouldn't be doing the bottle and this juice justice if I did not, take it in and enjoy the palate. But talk about some of the, again, this is if I'm going back to you in London and you're saying, I want to create my own whiskey, and you're talking about taking those two brands and putting them together, the idea of the nose and what you were looking to have people experience.
Yeah. So it's really interesting, right? This was one of the early conversations I had with Jordan about how do we create the whiskey that I want it to be. And And probably in truth, cask strength is closer to that flavor profile that we first envisioned, but we didn't want to, our first foray into the market wasn't going to be a cask strength. And what I loved about what Jordan was making in Breckenridge was kind of the size of the production, but also the mouthfeel of a rye bourbon, right? So for me, rye is lots of and it's kind of a high corn rye. Like I know rye has to be 51% rye, but theirs was kind of, I think from memory, it was 30 or 40% corn. And so you got lots of that buttery corn that, but then the spice of the rye, right? And that was, for me, that was kind of like a New World Shiraz in the wine world, or that was really loads of pepper and lots of spice. And what I didn't want to just make an Irish version of that, what I did want was lots of the coating over your tongue of those, I think they're the lower alcohols that there's, and once again, I'm talking a bit of, we often talk about me being a distiller. I sat some distillers exams, but I failed them. So I'm not a distiller. And I wanted loads of oak. My favorite wines are oak forward. They're Cabernets. There's and that's French oak. That's my favorite type of wine. I know we drink it with food, but like for me, that's where the core of the flavor profile I love. But also, I wanted to be aware that I didn't want to be a Me Too Irish whiskey. So I didn't want to do sherry finish. I didn't want to do a port finish that was kind of thin, but with sherry notes. That wasn't where I thought, that wasn't where I thought, well, like, I like chocolate cake. I like big red wines. I like big bourbons. But I'm from Ireland. And so I needed to try and come up with a flavor that married those two. And then, so with Blend One, which I know you guys have tried, but we crafted that for ages. As I said, I flew across the Atlantic to make sure to, like, maybe 6 or 7 times to go see Jordan to make sure you're getting exactly right. With cask strength, we just shook the barrel, put it through a sieve, and this what came out. So we didn't really know, to such an extent that the bottles were printed before we knew what the alcohol content was going to be. So we kind of guessed on it with samples. And also, we forgot to put the ABV on. So this doesn't have an ABV on the front. It has it on the back, and we got to use it from the TTB, but they won't be, those bottles have been discontinued. So there'll be collector's items at some point in the future.
I got a collector's item too.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Now, it's really good whiskey.
You say so yourself.
Well, that's kind of the interesting thing, isn't it, Rich? Like for me, whiskey's kind of work, right? I don't drink a lot of whiskey because I go to events, I taste and all that sort of stuff. But if we're at home in the evening, myself and Faye will have a glass of wine or a beer or a tequila or but so I don't drink Natterjack all that regularly. And every time I do, I'm like, we make really good whiskey. And it's a really nice position to be in, that each time, you have a taste of your product, you're kind of like, this is pretty cool. But so there's loads of, for me in the 4 palette, there's loads of that spice, that kind of those higher alcohols. But then as it goes back over your palate to where the tannins of red wines would usually activate my tongue, I'm left with this butterscotch. And that's what we weren't expecting, if I'm being honest. When we put this together, I wasn't expecting that, because it's completely different to the flavor profile of Blend One. And it deserves the double gold it got. Like, I know it's my whiskey and I get that, but I'm so proud of the team and how they've crafted this and brought it to market and everything like that. Like I couldn't be prouder of them, and it's really nice. Well, there's no other way. Like, you don't get, so one of the things people ask is, do you get criticisms? I told you that story about the guy, and we very rarely do. But one of the criticisms can be that Blend One can be a bit light. And I get that. We made it light for a very particular reason that we discussed earlier. But whenever someone says that to me, I get them to taste the cask strength. And it doesn't matter if you are a wizened old bourbon drinker that never drinks anything else and is chronically dehydrated, or if you're new to the market. The only people who don't like the cast strength tend to be people who don't really like whiskey. If you like whiskey, cast strength will tick your box. And we can't ask much more than that, right?
What really I got to enjoy here, Aidan, is watch you. You're humble. I mean, what I got from you was this humility of realizing that even though you have a hand in this is your whiskey, you're tasting it and going, this is our whiskey? Like it's exceeded your expectations of what the thought was at the inception, that this is something that from the beginning, wow, this is what was born out of, I can make some whiskey. I can make an Irish whiskey that this would be my favorite whiskey. And as you're speaking to that profile, as you're speaking to what I got was like the first thing, you know, the mouthfeel, the coating that you spoke about was there. And it's almost like maple syrup that comes there. And then what happens is because of the proof, it immediately evaporates. It hits your tongue, it evaporates. And then I got what to me was more of a gin experience where I got these pine notes to that. That's where I think the idea of a rye comes in, because you're getting that spice, but there was almost somewhat of a botanical experience that I would expect if I was drinking a gin, and that oakiness is there. And the first thing I said, and I appreciate you talking about the buttery note, because there was such an oily coating, but it was like that butterscotch, but that butter, it was the salty dairy kind of a feel and finish of all the bourbons. And look, bourbon, whiskey, scotch, there are some that pair well with a steak or a steak dinner. This was the first one I believe I've had where that conjures up the idea that I really want to sit and drink a steak with this. This is steak and Natterjack.
Yeah, I get that.
It's like that perfect pairing, and the that cherry is still there, that spiciness is still there. And being that we're from Pennsylvania, we've got New York, we've got Maryland, we've got, you know, the states that want to expand on the fact that they make great rye, and that's their history and their lineage, that this is where rye comes from. This is that heritage grain. This appeals to me very much. But this is also, if you love bourbon, if you're a bourbon drinker, if you're a rye drinker, this, you know, go for this cast strength Natterjack Irish whiskey, because it's going to exceed your expectations too.
I think so. Thank you. They're really kind words. And I agree with you on the steak dinner. Like, I think one way to maybe, you know, get ahead of that cask strength nature, right? There's only so many cask strength whiskeys you can have before, you know, things start to go sideways. But if you're having it with a really nice steak and some béarnaise sauce and some chips, man, I think it'd be amazing. Yeah.
I'm thinking, what time's dinner?
Dead right. Yeah.
I even got, now that we talked a little bit, I even got this wonderful sourness that pronounced at the end. And that's why I said this is an Irish story. This is, you're in for a long story if you're going to start to sip this whiskey. Now, to your point, this is also something, as you spoke about, this is a cocktail whiskey. This is something that you don't just want to say, hey, do you want an ice cube in that? Do you want this neat? You can start playing with this and being very creative as far as cocktail ideas.
100%. And what we've got a drink down here that's a Texan Toad, right? Where it's not complicated, Rich. We get Natterjack or Natterjack cast strength. We put ginger beer and a dash of bitters in it. And like it comes from this old South African drink called a gunner, which you used to drink after golf, which was ginger beer, ginger ale, and a dash of Angostura bitters, right? And it was a really refreshing drink. And I was playing golf with these South African guys, and they were like, have you ever had a gunner? I won't do a South African accent again. But I was like, this with Natterjack would be amazing. And we just started doing it in Texas this summer. And to say, like, we've executives from some of the biggest whiskey companies in the world saying this is now their drink of choice. We've tried it with some of our partners, some of our peers, Irish whiskies. It doesn't work as well. Something about Natterjack and the spice of ginger beer and that tiny dash of Angostura bitters is an amazing summertime drink, which I know, given we're coming into October in Pennsylvania, not many people are looking for summertime drinks, but next summer maybe we'll do something with a ginger beer company.
Hey, that not only sounds like a summertime drink, that sounds like a fall and winter drink. It's an all-season drink.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, and I know you're not a smoky guy, but I'm thinking, you could float a little mezcal with a little old-fashioned. That's one of the things I made with a little bit of orange marmalade this past weekend. And the orange plays well if you're doing that high rye or high spice style of whiskey. That would play amazingly well. But with that smoke chimney, adding a little smoke to it, a little mezcal, this is very forgiving to other flavors that come in and they play so well. And that's exciting because now I can start to think creatively, what can I do next with this? What other, flavors can I bring into this? Maybe a blueberry simple syrup. Things, like there's Tiffany Berrier. She's the drinking coach. We've had other cocktail, aficionados on here. They would definitely give this much better service than I would. But I'm the home bar guy, right? What can I do to make this even more, of an elevated opportunity?
100%. And I think so. I know the smoke you're talking about in mezcal, and I'm not necessarily anti-smoke. What I don't like is peated, and that's largely because I think after I have a glass of peated whiskey, I think I smell like peat the next day, and it's probably more in my nostrils than anything else. But I just the nature it doesn't. I don't like peat, but I do like mezcal smoke, and I do like, when people have smokers now and they're putting a little bit of oak smoke over their old fashioned. I think that's amazing. I think this stands up to that. And I think, I like that idea of floating a little bit of mezcal on the top of an old-fashioned is maybe, what day is today? It's Monday. I might struggle to get that one over the line with my wife.
Saturday was National Mezcal Day. So that's where I found to incorporate. Where you are right now, you've got the two SKUs, the two expressions. And I know it's hard because what I would say is, when you become a brand follower, when you become, this is my brand, or somebody like me in Fermented Adventure with Dawn and I, we want nothing but success, because the more you grow, the better you do as consumers. How do we benefit? Because the creative ideas and what was born out of your idea, we get to try more. And it's hard because people are like, all right, what else do you got? You got a port finish, a sherry finish, and I know you're focusing on growing this brand. Look, you're down in, within Texas, and I'm thinking, wow, what could an Ambarana finish, do with this wonderful juice and what you're distilling? So are there any ideas floating around that, you're looking to me again, you're renegades. What's next? Oh, so, there's a bottle being held up.
Yeah. This is an all grain variation and I'll arrange to get you some. This is going to be released. You're going to
pour and try it for me right now. I'll tell you what it tastes like. You'll love it.
This is going to be released in Q2 of 2024, because currently there's a business point here, which is our cast strength is quite expensive at $90, and our blend one is quite reasonable at $40. But you need to bring people along as well, right? Not everyone wants to spend $90 on a bottle of whiskey, which is fair enough. So with that in mind, we want our innovation to come through with we want our innovation to come through with by telling our story. And so that idea of things we screwed up is going to be told in that story. I can't say too much about it now because we're still working on the story, but it's a single grain. It's 53% ABV, and it is between the two of what we're talking about. The people I trust most in this business tell me it's the best whiskey we've ever made. And it's it's just lots more of that of what you're talking about in the cask strength, but it's more approachable because it doesn't have that real high proof. And it's, you know, my dad is always at me about getting him more. Faye, my wife, says it's the best whiskey we've produced. She'd drink it no problem instead of Natterjack. And maybe we released the wrong whiskey, but we're going to tell our story with the product. And Rich, I'll get you a sample so you can have a taste in the next week or so. And
I'll tell you what, that's very gracious of you. Or we can just hope, you know, if you're back at BCB, we can, you know, wade through the crowds and get our little taste too, and maybe, you know, pour back and talk a little more about that. You know, you've mentioned your father a couple of times. Yeah. And I'm curious, what does Dad say about having a son who's a distiller?
So my dad is a surgeon, and he's been a great supporter of this project, and also a great supporter of me and my family during what were difficult times. So during COVID, when we didn't have salaries and we couldn't earn and everything like that, like I got great support, emotional, financial. I got a couple of hard words as well about some decisions I should make, but he's been amazing. He's a long time wine fan, and, you know, we used to go on holidays in the wine regions in France, and he's always, you know, been a massive, I think he'd take offense to it, but like a gourmand sort of a thing. Like, you know, he likes his food and likes his wine, and he was instrumental in all the tasting aspects of the early part of this. When I come back from my trips to the States, actually, that's interesting. On our first ever distilling trip, himself and myself went to the Catskill Mountains, to the Catskill Distilling Company, and did a 3-day course up there. And like two Irish lads across in the Catskill Mountains trying to learn about distilling was kind of this harebrained scheme, and it was amazing. Turned out, as we drove past, is it Belmont? The Belmont Stakes that are near there, Belmont Racetrack is near. He's like, oh, I've been in there. I was like, have you? Yeah. And it turns out there's all these stories that a father and his son never knew. Well, that I never knew about him. He knows all my stories, but some of them. So he was always, you know, always championed this as a project, and as even from in the hardest times to the best times, he's been amazing. And he's got a better palate than me. So yeah,
that's high praise. I mean, it sounds to me like more than anything else, he's proud of you. And
I hope so. Yeah.
I mean, what you're doing is you're a craftsman. You're assembling a team. You're taking this idea from inception to what we're getting to enjoy in the bottle today, to other expressions that really pull everybody together and allow them to shine and produce something that people get to enjoy. Now, in the United States, where can people find your bottles? How do they get a hold of them for themselves?
So before I do that ask and the push to buying, let me just focus on something you said there, which is back to the point about the easy thing and the easy thing about a bull maybe over a toad, right? And the easy thing when you've got a whiskey brand is to say, come together with your friends and drink our product. And that's true, but that's what everybody talks about, because largely healthy use of alcohol is social, right? But for me, it's even more than that, right? I got into drinking because it's great fun, right? Irish whiskey's kind of lost its way in a fun capacity, right? It's very serious. It's come together with your friends and have a heart to heart. You know, this is the by the fire and we're all da 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 da, and it's provenance this and no, that's not for me, right? I want you to go together with your friends, wherever you happen to be, your back garden, your front room, on a walk, on a hike, camping, I don't care, and have fun, right? Laugh your asses off, and laugh at each other, laugh at us. I don't care. In fact, I'd like you to. And with that in mind, that's the essence of this brand. It's not, aren't we cool drinking this? Because we don't care what we look like. If we did, we wouldn't have a toad in the bottle. It's about how we see the world and how people should see the world while they're drinking Natterjack, which is in a really positive, fun way. And people can buy, back to your question, which I get killed if I don't mention it. We're on Reserve Bar in the US. You can click through our website, natterjack.com, natterjack.com. There's a shop there that can go straight through to Reserve Bar. We'll have our own direct-to-consumer site up and running in about a month. And then chain wise, we're in 15 states. We've got a store locator on the website. I won't ask your listeners to listen to me list off Total Wine and More in Florida and New Jersey, but we are sold in some stores in Pennsylvania. So we don't have, I don't know if it's illegal. I don't really know how it happens, if I'm being honest, Rich, but we're in a few stores in Pennsylvania. I'm happy to share this with you.
Somebody waves a magic wand and they end up on the shelves and nobody knows how they got there, but make sure you go out there and buy them so they can restock them really soon, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And then we also have a merch site, which if you want the toad on a t-shirt, they're not crazy expensive. And I'm at Whiskey Riots over the next few months. We're going to be in St. Pete on St. Paddy's Day. In the road to Christmas, there's tastings in Texas, in Florida, in Michigan, in New York. So we'll be around. And if you reach out to us on Instagram, we'll always help you find a place to get it.
You know, I think, again, what really comes back to our first Natterjack experience was fun. It was, and I don't use this word lightly to say you're disrupting. You're a disruptor in the whiskey world, because I think there are a lot of brands today that would like to embrace what Natterjack is doing, but it's hard because they have people to answer to, or they have their own walls that they don't want to, they don't want to break down these walls because they've created their own brand as well. There are plenty of whiskey brands that we love, but this is fun. This is just so much to it. It starts with you, your vision, the label, your team. And that's just something that we have gotten to enjoy as we've gotten to know you, as we've gotten to know you better, and continued success with what you're doing. Hopefully you'll be back at BCB, or we'll see you at some of these launches. And, this is just wonderful. So thank you so much for your time today. We're grateful for that. We're grateful for you being a friend of Fermented Adventure. And before we go, is there anything I haven't mentioned or you haven't mentioned that you want to talk about that the listeners should know?
No, just let's, like, the journeys that we're only started on the journey, right? We do things a bit differently. We can't reinvent the wheel. It's a regulated industry, but we are pushing the box. It's easier to get forgiveness than permission. So come along the journey. And thanks to you, Rich and Dawn, for having us along and for persisting. And probably I didn't answer the first email for a little while because life is hectic. But I love Fermented Adventure. And I love the support. So thank you so much. I mean that.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Aidan, what did it say? Sláinte?
Sláinte.
Sláinte.
Great to see you.